So, a very good afternoon to you, or good evening, or even good morning to you, wherever you are listening to this Coaching Cafe. My name is Natalie Ashdown. I am joined by the absolute superstar, fabulous person, Emma Doyle, today for our Coaching Cafe. And today we have a very exciting announcement for you. We want to tell you all about the book that we have been working on, Emma's book, and it's called What Makes a Great Coach. So, hi, Emma. I can see you've got the background there. It's very exciting to see you today.
Yeah, g'day Nat. I've got a bit of chills, even a bit of bump in it.
I
It's
have
well over
to.
35 degrees here in Colorado today, Celsius, of course, and it's super hot. But I've got the chills because I'm so excited.
Yeah, and we've got people dialing in from all around the world. Emma from Columbus or Colorado, people in Australia dialing in from Perth, WA, Japan, Kyoto, Bris Vegas here in Queensland, Williamstown in Vancouver. So it's just wonderful to see everyone. Thank you for joining us for this very exciting webinar. So before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians of the lands on which we're all meeting today around the world. Pay our continuing respects to them, to elders past, present and emerging, and to their continuing connection to the land, waters and communities of Australia. And we pay our respects to other Indigenous people that might be joining us from the line, from whatever country you are from. So Emma, a quick agenda. We're going to talk about what makes a great coach. It's exciting times. But really, we want to tell everybody about the background to the book and why it's really important. And then, of course, if everyone is here, if this is the first time you've joined the Coaching Cafe, we are all about creating a community. We want to share learning experience and have thought-provoking conversations. And of course, if you are here to earn your ICF CCEUs, that will be available at the end of the session. And of course, this is a wonderful opportunity to share your knowledge and experience, Emma, around what makes a great coach. So, shall we launch into telling everyone all about the book?
Yeah, I would love that. Let's get going.
Fantastic. So, Emma, you've been coaching now for what, over 30 years. Can you perhaps tell us, take us way back to it is described in the book, but can you take us back to your very first coaching moment? I think it's really great for everyone to hear that.
Yeah, I would love to. So it started with my entrepreneurial spirit because a paper round was my first job, and that was
Yes.
$7 a week, for 3 slogging hours each, like 3 days a week, delivering papers. And so all of a sudden, my tennis coach said to me, well, if you deliver one coaching session for one night, I'll give you an extra private lesson. And the kick serve had just come out, Natalie, and I wanted to learn how to hit the serve. So he said, would I do this? And I was like, oh, I would love that. So, and also looking at what my friends were doing, working at restaurants and so forth, I was like, oh, I think working in a tracksuit, I get to hang out with kids, be a big kid myself. I was still a kid, really, at 14. What did I know? Not much. But the experience of that first lesson was something I will never forget. And I know not everybody has this feeling, but I did walk off that court thinking, this is the greatest job in the world, being a coach. And how can I do that? And how can I explore being the best coach that I can be? So it was an amazing experience at 14 years of age.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I know when I was writing the book with you, I was taken back to my early days of tennis as well.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
sticking the ball up our pants, up under our bum huggers to,
Well, for
to get ready.
America, they call that the bloomers, of course.
The bloomers, under your bloomers,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. So it was really nice to go back to the early days. But this book, What Makes a Great Coach, it's not a tennis book. Tell us, what it's all about.
Yeah. So really, it's all about the coach's way of being. So Natalie's brilliant idea to reframe the word chapter into practices. And
Mm.
that was really significant. That was when I had my own aha moment with this book and the value of this book, because the practices that we've synthesized from the data, which is over 500 of the world's leading tennis, sport, and business coaches, into what makes a great coach. So these top 10 practices remind us or invite us to reflect on our own practice as a coach. And interestingly, they're nothing to do with how you hit a forehand. These
Yes.
practices are nothing to do with the technical skill of coaching. They are to do with predominantly relationships between you and another person and your own emotional intelligence skills. So that was really interesting as well. You challenged me on that, Nat. You said, Emma, you should break these 151 qualities, which you can half see on the blackboard behind me. That was the concept behind the cover, and put them into 4 categories. So I did that: relationships, emotional, cognitive, and technical. And it was incredible how many of these qualities that we hear in the book really invite us to reflect on our best coaching self as practices. So it's a coach's way of being. And there's reflective questions at the end. I want you to get your highlighter out and highlight the sections, or we have sort of bolded and put them in italics, the bits that we like as well. And at the end, there's the notebook, isn't there, Nat, with some reflective questions?
Yeah, I really loved working through the top 10 practices with you, because it really helped me as a super experienced coach to really reflect on the practices. And I remember all of the conversations we had to say, well, what does it really mean? For example, empathy. What does that really mean? But also, how do we demonstrate more empathy in our coaching practice? And how do then we bring that to be the best coach that we want to be? So I, yes, of course, I helped you write the book, Emma, but the journey and the reflection that we've been on, I think, is really special as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thank you. That in itself is a funny story. You know, I like to tell a quick story, but
Of course.
about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and I had kept attempting to put this manuscript together. And Nat said, well, how's your book going? And I was like, well, remember when I asked you to look at it about a year ago? And this was probably about 3 years ago. And you put all that red pen through it so
I know.
beautifully.
I
And in
know.
fact, I haven't picked it up since. And that's when you turned to me and you said, Emma, come on, we can do this. Let's get this. You know, the content is too good not to put it out into the world. So I appreciate just the fact that you opened that door and allowed, you know, us to collaborate on this project together.
Oh, thank you. And it's been an absolute pleasure. So now tell me, and by the way, everyone, jump into the chat box, ask any questions you like. Just don't ask us to reveal all the top 10 practices. We're going to reveal those over the next few coaching cafes for you, of course. So we don't want to do too many spoiler alerts, but feel free to jump in and ask Emma any questions that you might have as we go along as well. Emma, take us back to the research. You said the research was based on over 500 interviews of the world's top coaches. So tell me more about that. Tell me about how did that start, and give us some of the stats and the statistics behind your research.
Yeah, would love to. So again, going back to a really cool story, how it all began in 2016. And I sort of mentioned it earlier. Even when I was 14, I had this deep curiosity about, well, what does make a great coach? And then I went overseas to discover what makes a great coach. Fast forward to 2016, and I'm at an event where Roger Federer is playing in a pro-am just before the US Open that year. And all of a sudden I had 30 seconds between his walk from the court to his helicopter. And I had a moment and I'm like, well, what am I going to ask him? And I was like, I've only got 2 questions. And one of those was my guiding question. Hey, Rog, as we would say down under, you know, can you tell me what makes a great coach? And we didn't have long, so I didn't say in 1 to a maximum of 3 words, which became the research question. But he said, someone who listens. So that's a small hint there of one of the practices in the book is definitely on listening. And what that did is it catapulted a podcast called the Coaching Podcast. The podcast now that I've been releasing, one business coach, one sports coach, predominantly, it's very tennis heavy, lots of tennis coaches there as well. And that question is our 3rd question we ask of every guest. And all of a sudden, we started getting all this data because it is in 1 to a maximum of 3 words, what makes a great coach? Feel free to pop that in the chat box while we're
What you think,
chatting
yes.
away, what you think makes a great coach. Absolutely no right or wrong answer, of course. And this data started to be really, really insightful. Even the way people answered the question, some people answered it in 3 words like a statement, and some people answered it with 3 qualities. And I was like, that in itself is interesting. So what that then became with the podcast, specific interviews, I've probably now done around over 200 and released over 100 so far. And I just started asking anyone that I would meet who was a coach, who then a little bit of background about them and asking them the guiding question, which turned out to be, so 520 is where I capped it. But by the way, I'm still collecting. I'll never stop collecting data for it. But 520 is where I capped it for the book. And of that, 16 were tennis coaches, and of tennis players, I beg your pardon. And those tennis players, 7 of them were former world number ones. So that left us, we've got 504 coaches, broken down into 105 business coaches, 328 tennis coaches, and 71 sports coaches from over 21 different sports. Insert 50-50, almost 50-50 in gender. I must say 51% women, female coaches. I just thought I'd throw that in there. That was important to me to have equal gender, but especially in my sport of tennis, where it's 80% male dominated, I wanted to make sure that the female voice was heard, and 48 countries. So I think in itself, it gives us what that data gives us is a beautiful cross spread of not just what one coach said makes a great coach and we should all copy that. So it is rich in these qualities of what people have said, as well as, of course, what my 30 years and your very experienced, one of Australia's leading business and executive coaches, your experience together, that's 50 years, by the way. I know we don't look that old, but I did start at 14. I think it gives us a rich foundation for which the practices emerged. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think for those of people that don't know, Emma is uh, um, an elite high performance coach in tennis, but you've also made for quite some time now that switch to the corporate world, and so it seemed important to us, and particularly to you, Emma, to make sure that we had an amazing cross section of people from the tennis world. So elite tennis coaches. You've got you know, roll off a few of those names just so people know who you've been talking to. Nick Bollettieri.
Yep, Nick Bollettieri. He's definitely has a strong presence in the book. Also, we've got Patrick Mouratoglou, who's the former coach of Serena Williams and now working with Simona Halep a little bit. But he brings a wealth of stories and experience to the book. Judy Murray, of course, one of my all-time favorite people and amazing coaches. She's not only the mother of Andy Murray and Jamie Murray, they're both number ones, former world number ones, but she's an incredible coach within her own rights. Even Pat Vandermeer has given some insights on Dennis Vandermeer when he was alive, some of his insights. So, there's some pretty high-level tennis coaches. And then in the business world, 2 people that come to mind who have been heavy in tennis that then went into corporate, Jim Lair and Jack Groppel, the Human Performance Institute that they started. So we've got their responses to what makes a great coach. We've got some incredible coaches from other sports in there as well. Rick Charlesworth, the former Australian Hockey Roos coach, is in there. We've got Cliff Mallett, the former Australian track and field coach. So just an incredible depth on that level, as well as some business coaches and some coaches that people would have never heard of that have had an incredible impact on my life. And you are one of those people, Nat. You are one of those people. When I got out of tennis altogether, and back in 2006, I went, and that's when I first met Natalie and studied under the open door coaching methodology. And Natalie made me do a session where she said I wasn't allowed to give one directive command. I had to ask all questions, and I was like, what is this? And what makes a great coach? It's very question heavy. It's very question heavy at the end of every practice, because we invite reflection, and we want that in ourselves and our coaches, because that's why it's called a practice again, isn't it? It's not something we just go, oh yeah, empathy, I do that. Or listening, I wasn't very good at it, but now I've got that ticked off. It's a practice, it's an evolution.
Yeah, I think that's really important. There's so much that you said in that, and picking up on that idea of practice, that was really important to us because it is something that we practice. It's something that we continue to practice and continue to do. And what I loved about it is that what makes a great coach, there's 10 practices there. You could actually just choose one and say, I'm going to focus on that this week or this month. Do the reflection question so it helps us. And by the way, I'm just going to let everybody know Judy Murray, as you mentioned, an elite tennis coach in her own right, mother of Andy and Jamie Murray, has written the foreword to the book. And a number of those people that you actually mentioned, Patrick, and the other wonderful people, have also written your testimonials, Emma. And if I could just read maybe Jim's testimonial, he says, a compelling read that takes you to the heart of coaching, a must read for coaches at all levels. Now, tell me about that. You wanted this book to be a book for coaches at all levels, so not just tennis coaches, but we put a lot of work into thinking about how what we can learn from tennis plays out in the corporate world, and how the corporate world can tell some things to people in tennis. So, that blend between tennis and corporate, what we could learn from each other. So tell me more about that. Not just a coach, not just a book for beginners, but a book for all coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also goes back to my early days of coaching myself, that I was so technically ingrained in how I worked, that I didn't spend enough time on skills that help me better understand people. All of the practices help us better understand people, help us better understand ourselves emotionally. Remember, emotional and relationships were the two highest categories across all the qualities. And so that was really important to me, to give people tools and to be able to understand that there's so much more to coaching than just being able to hit a ball over the net, or just say, oh, I'm a coach, when really there's so much more depth to that. And for example, the crossover between tennis and business that comes to mind is around resilience. So imagine someone like Roger Federer and Serena Williams, who feature in the book. Now, I think it was back in 2016, they both won, finished world number one, and they won 80% of their matches. But guess how many points they lost? Both of them lost 55% of all points. So if you don't have the practice of resilience, and as a coach, if you're not practicing resilience, which is your ability to get over yourself, then it's difficult to play the next point. So in the business world, if you don't have that practice of resilience and the skills and the tools to help coach resiliency, then it's going to be very difficult for you to move on, and you'll end up quitting quite quickly and sliding, as you say, Natalie, playing below the line, one of our favorite tools within Leader as Coach, which is a coach that we both run here now in Australia and in the US. So that's a great example to me, where that's written in the book and it transfers directly into the workplace as an example of what we need to focus on as coaches. And yeah, that's one that came to mind.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we talk about that in the book, that in elite tennis or in elite sport, people have to move on very quickly. Like they've got to apply their anchors, or apply their, put it to the back of their mind, so sharpen their mindset around that. Whereas in the corporate world, there's a lot of discussion about resilience, but not a lot of discussion about how you do that. So there's lots that we can learn. But also in the corporate world, we have a lot of time. We can debrief projects. We can call meetings. We can sit down for an hour and do post implementation reviews. There's so much more time we have. So perhaps one of the things that I learned is that tennis can really and elite sport can really help us in the corporate world about how we manage our resilience, but most importantly, how, as you said, we coach others around that topic as well. So thank you. And as Ian said, it's easy to demonstrate these practices, for example, be non-judgmental or be resilient, but it's quite a lot harder to actually demonstrate it. So therefore, we need to be able to think about how we're bringing that to our workplaces as well.
Yeah,
Emma, there's
absolutely.
another question here from Chris, who asks, were there any distinct differences in the answers you got from tennis and sports coaches versus business coaches? Now, I think I know the answer to that question, but yeah, would you like to share with us?
Yeah, there definitely was, but it was subtle. So it wasn't necessarily, but it was something that I picked up on since coming from a sports coaching background and a business coaching background. So some of the practices in the book that were heavy within the business coaching world was empathy, listening, and curiosity. So they're an example of 3 practices within the book that showed up in the business coaches framework or tool in their coaching toolkit versus the sports coaches, where we saw passion, for example, was very heavy, belief in your student. So they're 2 distinctions that I really noticed when I split the data in between the sports coaches and the business coaches. And another great example of why I love both, because we got this cross section of answers that then we were able to bring together. Because does a business coach need to be passionate? Absolutely. Do sports coaches, especially tennis coaches, need to work on their curiosity skills and asking more questions? And I'm put my hand up first to say absolutely.
Yeah, it's a really thank you for sharing that, and it's a really good I think distinction to make, because we often talk about the differences between sports coaching and what we would call corporate coaching or workplace coaching, and I suppose I wanted to make it clear to everyone that the emphasis we do have in the book is that it's not that rah rah come down from the balcony yell and tell kind of traditional sports coaching. It really is the much more modern sports coaching, and actually what we would associate with corporate coaching or workplace coaching. So, bringing out the best in people, bringing out the answers with them, coaching them around the different practices, asking quality questions, listening, empathy, all of those things.
Yep, couldn't agree more, Nat.
And Ian's asked another interesting question here. He's saying, so are you saying that elite coaches need to have the skills and the traits they are coaching in, like resilience? So we need to demonstrate these skills. We have to have these skills, and then we coach in those skills as well.
100% self coach. The book was nearly called Discover Your Inner Coach back in the
Yeah.
day, because it is a core philosophy of mine that we really do need to work on ourselves continuously. It's a evolution, isn't it? And so having that self-awareness around what maybe even a skill like resilience comes to us naturally on a tennis court, but then how do we actually coach that, and how can the business coach learn from that micro moments of resiliency in the sports coaching world? So self-awareness is huge in the book, and that's where we start. Before we can empower others, we have to be able to coach ourselves. So it is still one of the core philosophies. But I love the title, Nat, in the fact that it's a question. It's a question. The title's a question. And I think you helped me unpack that. So I'm very, very grateful, because it did have a number of different titles. Let's be honest.
I did as well. That's right. Took a while. Took a while. But no, I think that's great, because one of the things that I think we want for the book is for coaches at all levels to actually think about for themselves, what do they think makes a great coach. So here's the top 10 practices of the world's best coaches. But think about it for yourself. What we will all say different characteristics or different practices. So what makes a great coach for us is a beautiful question for us to reflect on in the book as well. So wonderful. So Emma, we've only got a couple more minutes. All right, tell us. I've got it in my hot little hands here. But tell us, if you will, what's the plan? When can people actually get hold of what makes a great coach? And oh, by the way, it's full of the most delightful, heartfelt stories. I read a couple of the stories again recently when I read the proof. They're your stories, Emma. It's your personal journey. Just tell us a little bit about that as well, and then we'll then tell us how we can get hold of the book. So just a
Yeah,
little bit about the
sure.
personal side of it as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I felt that it was important to share my early journey of what it was like to grow up in a big family where I was good at a lot of sports, but not really good at anything. So I feel like I'm an ordinary person living in an extraordinary life because of coaching. I wasn't world number one. And so many people don't know who I am, but through the sport of tennis and through the coaching profession, I feel like I live the most extraordinary life day in, day out, being able to work with companies, being able to work one-on-one with people as a coach, and transferring that beyond tennis is why I'm so passionate about the book. There's been many times where I thought it would never get across the finish line. And so it is important to share with everybody how this is the first webinar of even talking about the book, which almost brings a tear to my eye, that we are using the month of August to talk about the practices, to bring it to people's awareness. I haven't really wanted to talk about it because I'm like, I don't know where the finish line is, Nat, please help me.
Yeah.
But August is really our pre-launch, where we'll be letting you know exactly when it's ready. The goal is early September. And if we can hit the first, wouldn't that be amazing? But please follow us on socials and whatmakesagreatcoach.com. That'll keep you up to date with the proofs, because don't forget, some things are out of our hands. Right now, I'm so happy to say that the typesetting is done. It's finished. The cover is, we hope you love it. It's, it's on a coach writing on a blackboard, all the different qualities that make up a great coach. And so that's where we're at, Nat. What are we going to be focusing on next week at the Coaching Cafe?
Well, actually, thank you for asking. So next week, watch out on the socials, everyone. It is coming. It's been loaded up onto Amazon now. We're going to give everyone the opportunity to purchase the book for an unbelievable cheap price so that we can really get it out there. But yeah, join us next week on the Coaching Cafe. We are going to be talking about the number one quality that came out of the research, which, does anyone care to guess?
Should we reveal it? Drum roll.
It's passion. There you go. It's passion. And we'll tell you about the different coaches, the elite coaches that actually mention passion, and how we can bring that to our work as well. So thank you everyone for being part of this cafe. Emma, thank you so much. How good is it to be able to just say, here it is, and we're ready to go, and we're ready to share your incredible story around coaching, and we're ready to share the incredible practices, and we are finally ready to share your amazing research with the world. I said to you, this book must come to fruition. So we're ready to share that, which is very exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you everyone for listening as one of our practices. And I'm loving the little emojis coming up the screen here. I've never seen those before. I love that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. Join us for our next Coaching Cafe at the same time next week, and we'll introduce you to one of the most important practices, the number one practice, which is passion. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the line and for being part of this celebration to announce the book.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Oh.